Imagine this, a picture-perfect white couple, glowing with joy as they welcome their newborn twins into the world. The nursery is ready, the family is gathered, and the future looks bright. But when the nurse hands them their babies, their smiles freeze. The room falls silent. The twins are black. In that moment, their world shatters, and a mystery begins to unravel, one that will challenge everything they thought they knew about love, family, and identity. What happened? How could this be? And what explosive truth lies hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives? If you're here, it's because you're searching for answers. You're not alone. This story is about to take you on a roller coaster of emotions, and by the end of this video, you'll get the truth you've been waiting for. But be warned, once you start, you won't be able to look away. Let's talk about you for a second. You clicked on this video because you're curious. You're the kind of person who loves a good mystery, who craves stories that make you think, feel, and question everything. You're here because you want to know what happens next, and I promise you, this story will deliver. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. How well do you really know the people closest to you? How well do you know yourself? This story isn't just about a couple and their unexpected twins. It's about secrets, lies, and the lengths we go to protect the ones we love. It's about the moments that change us forever. And it's about the truth, no matter how shocking or painful it may be. So, if you're ready to uncover the mystery, keep watching. Because this is one story you won't forget. Meet Sarah and James, the couple at the heart of this tale. They're the kind of people who seem to have it all: a beautiful home, successful careers, and a love that's the envy of everyone around them. When Sarah becomes pregnant, it feels like the final piece of their perfect life is falling into place. But as the due date approaches, strange things start to happen. Sarah notices subtle changes in James's behavior. He's distant, distracted, and sometimes even secretive. She brushes it off, chalking it up to the stress of becoming a first-time dad. But deep down, she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Then, the babies arrive and everything changes. The truth, when it finally comes to light, is more shocking than anyone could have imagined. It's a truth that will force Sarah and James to confront their pasts, their choices, and the very foundation of their relationship. And it's a truth that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family. As we dive deeper into this story, I want you to think about the people in your own life. The ones you trust, the ones you love, the ones you think you know inside and out. Because this story isn't just about Sarah and James, it's about all of us. It's about the secrets we keep, the lies we tell, and the truths we're afraid to face. It's about the moments that test us, the choices that define us, and the love that holds us together, even when everything else falls apart. So, as you watch this video, I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if you were in Sarah and James's shoes? How far would you go to protect the ones you love? And what would you do if the truth turned out to be something you never saw coming? Now, let's set the stage. The hospital room is quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the calm before a storm. Sarah is exhausted but happy, her arms cradling her newborn twins. James stands by her side, his face pale, his hands trembling. The nurse looks at them, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. "Congratulations," she says, but her voice lacks the usual warmth. Sarah looks down at her babies, her heart swelling with love. But then she notices the color of their skin. It's darker than hers, darker than James's. Her breath catches in her throat. She looks up at James, searching his face for answers. But he's staring at the babies, his eyes wide with shock. "This can't be," he whispers. But it is. And as the reality sinks in, the questions begin to swirl. How could this happen? What does it mean? And what secrets are about to be revealed? This is where the story takes a turn. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Because as Sarah and James begin to dig deeper, they uncover a web of lies, betrayal, and hidden truths that will change their lives forever. It's a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, a story that will make you laugh, cry, and everything in between. But most importantly, it's a story that will make you think. So, if you're ready to uncover the truth, keep watching. Because this is just the beginning, and the best or maybe the worst is yet to come. But before we go any further, let me ask you this. What would you do if the life you thought you knew turned out to be a lie? What would you do if the truth was more shocking than you ever imagined? Stay tuned, because the answers are coming, and they're going to blow your mind. The hospital room, once filled with the soft hum of anticipation, now felt like a pressure cooker ready to burst. Sarah's mind raced as she stared at her twins, their tiny faces so perfect yet so inexplicably different from what she had imagined. James, usually the calm and collected one, was pacing the room, his hands running through his hair in frustration. The nurses had assured them that there was no mistake, these were their children. But how? Sarah's heart ached with a mix of love and confusion. She couldn't deny the bond she felt with the babies, but the questions gnawed at her. Was this some kind of medical miracle? A twist of fate? Or was there something deeper, something darker at play? James, on the other hand, seemed to be wrestling with his own demons. His initial shock had given way to a quiet, almost eerie calm. But Sarah knew him too well. She could see the storm brewing behind his eyes, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched, as if he were holding back words he couldn't or wouldn't say. As the days turned into weeks, the couple tried to settle into their new reality. Friends and family came to visit, their congratulations tinged with awkwardness, as they tried to make sense of the situation. Sarah's mother, ever the pragmatist, suggested genetic testing. There has to be an explanation, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. James, however, was vehemently opposed. "They're our children," he insisted, his tone sharper than usual. "That's all that matters." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. She began to notice little things: James's late-night phone calls, the way he would disappear for hours without explanation, the way he avoided looking at the twins for too long. It was as if he were carrying a secret too heavy to bear, and Sarah was determined to find out what it was. Meanwhile, the twins named Emma and Noah were thriving. Their laughter filled the house, their tiny hands reaching out for their parents, with an innocence that melted Sarah's heart. But every time she looked at them, the questions came rushing back. She found herself scrolling through online forums, searching for stories of similar situations. She stumbled upon a thread about chimerism, a rare genetic condition where a person can have two sets of DNA. Could that be the answer? Or was it something else entirely? The more she read, the more she realized how little she knew about genetics, about her own family history, and even about James. They had been together for 10 years, married for 5, but suddenly, it felt like she was living with a stranger. One night, after the babies were asleep, Sarah decided to confront James. She found him in the study, staring at an old photo album. The room was dimly lit, the shadows playing across his face as he flipped through the pages. "James," she began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." He looked up, his eyes filled with the sadness she hadn't seen before. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you have questions. And I promise I'll tell you everything. But not yet. Please just give me a little more time." Sarah wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in his voice stopped her. It was a plea, a desperate cry for understanding. And so, against her better judgment, she agreed to wait. But the waiting was torture. Every day felt like a ticking time bomb, the tension between them growing thicker with each passing moment. As the weeks went by, Sarah began to notice other things, small, seemingly insignificant details that added to the mystery. There was the envelope she found in James's desk drawer, addressed to a woman named Clara. The name meant nothing to her, but the handwriting looked familiar. Then there was the phone call she overheard, James speaking in hushed tones about keeping it quiet and protecting the family. Who was he talking to? And what were they trying to hide? Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. She thought about hiring a private investigator, but something held her back. Maybe it was fear of what she might find, fear of losing the life she had worked so hard to build. Or maybe it was hope that James would come clean on his own, that they could work through this together. But as the days turned into months, the cracks in their relationship began to show. The once strong bond between Sarah and James was fraying, the weight of the unspoken truth pulling them further apart. Sarah found herself spending more time with the twins, pouring all her love and energy into them. They were her anchor, the one thing that kept her grounded in the midst of the chaos. But even they couldn't fill the void left by the growing distance between her and James. She began to wonder if they would ever find their way back to each other, or if the truth, when it finally came out, would be the thing that tore them apart for good. And then one day, the dam broke. Sarah was cleaning out the attic when she stumbled upon a box she had never seen before. It was tucked away in a corner, covered in dust, as if it had been hidden there for years. Her heart raced as she opened it, her hands trembling as she pulled out a stack of letters and photographs. The first photo stopped her cold. It was a picture of James, younger, happier, with his arm around a beautiful woman. The woman was holding a baby, her smile radiant. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized who the woman was. Clara. The name from the envelope. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was one she wasn't ready to see. She flipped through the letters, each one more heartbreaking than the last. They were filled with words of love, of longing, of regret. And then she found a letter that changed everything. It was from Clara, addressed to James. "I know you'll be a great father," it read. "Take care of our baby." Sarah's world spun. She felt like she was falling, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but she couldn't move. She just sat there clutching the letter, her mind racing with questions. Who was Clara? What had happened between her and James? And most importantly, what did this mean for her, for the twins, for their family? She knew she couldn't keep this to herself. She had to confront James, to demand the truth, no matter how painful it might be. But as she stood up, her legs shaky, she realized something else. This wasn't just about her and James anymore. This was about Clara, about the baby in the photo, about the secrets that had been buried for far too long. And as she made her way downstairs, the letter still clutched in her hand, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The tension in the house was palpable as Sarah approached James. He was in the living room, staring out the window, his back to her. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "James," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. He turned, his eyes widening as he saw the letter in her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening, the weight of the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air. And then, finally, James broke. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore. Sarah needed answers, and she needed them now. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and she was ready to face it, no matter how painful it might be. But as she looked into James's eyes, she realized that the truth might be more complicated and more devastating than she had ever imagined. And so, the story continues, the mystery deepening, the stakes growing higher with each passing moment. What will Sarah discover? What secrets are still waiting to be revealed? And how will this family survive the storm that's coming? Stay tuned, because the answers are closer than you think, and the truth is about to explode. The room felt like it was closing in on Sarah, as she stood there, the letter trembling in her hand. James's apology hung in the air, heavy and insufficient, like a bandage over a wound that needed stitches. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she took a deep breath, her voice steady but laced with a quiet fury. "Who is Clara, James? And who is this baby in the photo?" James looked at her, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was as if the truth was too big, too painful to put into words. Sarah took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Tell me everything. Now." James sank into the couch, his shoulders slumping, as if the weight of the world had finally crushed him. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara was someone from my past. Someone I loved." Sarah felt a sharp pang in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "And the baby?" James hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor. "Our baby," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Clara and I had a child together. A son." Sarah's mind reeled. A son? How could she not have known about this? How could James have kept something so monumental from her? She felt a surge of anger, but beneath it was a deep, aching sadness. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Why did you lie to me all these years?" James looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to tell you, Sarah. I did. But every time I tried, I couldn't find the words. I was afraid of losing you." Sarah shook her head, her own tears spilling over. "You should have trusted me, James. You should have told me the truth." James reached out to her, but she stepped back, her heart breaking all over again. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Your son. Where is he?" James looked away, his face etched with pain. "He's gone," he said quietly. "Clara and we lost him. He was only a few months old." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to be angry, to lash out at James for keeping this from her. But all she felt was an overwhelming sadness. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But even as she said the words, something didn't add up. If James and Clara had lost their son, then why were their letters talking about a baby? Why was Clara telling James to take care of our baby? Sarah's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle refusing to fit together. "James," she said slowly, her voice filled with suspicion, "what aren't you telling me?" James looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Sarah, please," he begged. "I've told you everything. Can't we just move on from this?" But Sarah knew better. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he avoided her gaze. There was more to this story, and she was determined to uncover it. The next few days were a blur. Sarah threw herself into caring for the twins, their innocent faces, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside her. But even as she fed them, bathed them, and rocked them to sleep, her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about the baby in the photo, about the secrets James was still hiding. She began to dig deeper, searching through old emails, social media accounts, anything that might give her a clue. And then one night, she found a message from Clara, sent just a few months ago. "James," it read, "I need to see you. It's about our son." Sarah's heart raced as she read the words. Our son. But James had said they lost him. So who was Clara talking about? Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. She thought about confronting James again, but something held her back. Instead, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She reached out to Clara, sending her a message through social media. "I need to talk to you," she wrote. "It's about James." To her surprise, Clara responded almost immediately. "Meet me tomorrow," she replied. "There's something you need to know." Sarah's heart pounded as she read the message. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure: this meeting could change everything. The next day, Sarah found herself sitting in a small cafe, her hands trembling as she waited for Clara to arrive. When she finally walked in, Sarah was struck by how beautiful she was. There was a quiet strength in her eyes, a resilience that spoke of a life filled with both joy and pain. Clara sat down across from her, her expression unreadable. "You're Sarah," she said, her voice soft but firm. Sarah nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said. "But there's something you need to know. Something James has been keeping from you." Sarah's heart raced as Clara began to speak, her words painting a picture of a past filled with love, loss, and secrets. She talked about her relationship with James, about the son they had together, and about the decision they had made to keep him a secret. But as she spoke, Sarah realized that there was more to the story, something even Clara didn't know. "James told me we lost him," Claire said, her voice breaking. "But I never believed it. I always felt like he was out there somewhere, waiting for us to find him." Sarah's mind raced as she listened, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to come together. But before she could say anything, Clara dropped the bombshell. "Sarah," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear, "I think your twins might be connected to my son." The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Her twins? Connected to Clara's son? How was that even possible? Her mind raced with questions, but before she could ask them, Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It was a picture of a baby, his face so familiar it made Sarah's heart ache. "This is my son," Clara said, her voice trembling. "And I think he might be the father of your twins." Sarah's world spun as she stared at the photo, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. But as the truth began to dawn on her, she realized that this was only the beginning. The secrets, the lies, the hidden connections, they were all part of a much larger story, one that was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. And as she sat there, staring at the photo, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The stakes had been raised, the mystery deepened, and the truth was closer than ever. But what would happen next? And how would Sarah and James survive the storm that was coming? Stay tuned, because the answers are about to explode, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Sarah sat frozen in the cafe, Clara's words echoing in her mind like a thunderclap. The photo of Clara's son, a baby who looked eerily familiar, lay on the table between them, a silent witness to the unraveling of a truth too shocking to comprehend. Her twins, Emma and Noah, connected to Clara's son, how could that even be possible? Her thoughts raced, piecing together fragments of the past few months, James's secrecy, his late-night calls, his reluctance to discuss the twins' appearance. It all began to make a horrifying kind of sense. But before she could process it fully, Clara leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Sarah, there's something else you need to know. James wasn't just keeping this from you. He was keeping it from me too. I didn't know about your twins until recently. And when I found out, I knew I had to see you. Because if my son is their father, then James isn't." The words hit Sarah like a tidal wave, knocking the breath out of her. James wasn't the father. Her mind flashed back to the hospital room, to the shock on his face when he first saw the twins. She had assumed it was because of their skin color, but now she realized it was something far deeper. James had known. He had known all along. And he had lied to her, to Clara, to everyone. Sarah felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly overshadowed by a crushing sense of betrayal. How could he do this? How could he let her believe these children were his when he knew the truth? She looked at Clara, her voice trembling as she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "If James isn't the father, then who is?" Clara hesitated, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "His name is Marcus," she said quietly. "He's my son. And he's the father of your twins." Sarah's mind reeled. Marcus? Clara's son? But how? Clara took a deep breath, her voice steady but laced with pain. Marcus was adopted when he was a baby. James and we were young, and we thought it was the best thing for him. But I never stopped thinking about him, never stopped wondering where he was. A few years ago, I started searching for him, and when I finally found him, I reached out. But he didn't want anything to do with me. He was angry, hurt, and I don't blame him. But then, a few months ago, I found out he had been in contact with James. And that's when I started to suspect something was going on. Sarah's heart pounded as the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. James had known about Marcus. He had known about the connection between Marcus and the twins. And he had chosen to keep it all a secret. But why? What could possibly justify such a betrayal? Clara seemed to read her thoughts. "James was trying to protect you," she said softly. "And Marcus. He thought if he kept it hidden, he could spare everyone the pain. But he was wrong. Secrets like this, they always come out eventually." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She thought about the twins, about the love she felt for them, about the life she had built with James. And she realized that, no matter what, those children were hers. They were her family. But she also knew that she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She had to confront James, to demand answers, to finally put an end to the lies. When Sarah returned home, James was waiting for her. He looked up as she walked in, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. "Sarah," he began, but she cut him off. "Don't," she said, her voice firm. "Don't say anything until I'm done." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding, as she laid it all out: the letters, the photo, the meeting with Clara, the truth about Marcus. James listened in silence, his face growing paler with each word. When she finished, he looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid of losing you." Sarah shook her head, her own tears spilling over. "You should have trusted me, James. You should have told me the truth. But instead, you lied to me. You let me believe these children were yours when you knew they weren't. How could you do that? How could you keep something like this from me?" James looked away, his voice barely audible. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I kept it hidden, I could protect you, protect the twins, protect Marcus. But I was wrong. And I'm so sorry." Sarah felt a surge of anger, but beneath it was a deep, aching sadness. She loved James, but she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. And as she looked at him, she realized that their relationship would never be the same. In the days that followed, Sarah and James struggled to navigate the new reality of their lives. They talked, they argued, they cried. But through it all, one thing remained constant: their love for the twins. Emma and Noah were the center of their world, and no matter what happened, they were determined to give them the best life possible. Sarah reached out to Clara, and together, they began to piece together the story of Marcus. They discovered that he had been living just a few towns over, unaware of the connection to the twins. When they finally met him, it was an emotional reunion, filled with tears, apologies, and a tentative hope for the future. Marcus was hesitant at first, but as he held Emma and Noah in his arms, something shifted. He saw himself in their faces, saw the family he had never known. And slowly, he began to open up, to let them in. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah, James, Clara, and Marcus began to build a new kind of family, one born out of love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond of the twins. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of pain and doubt, but they were determined to make it work, for the sake of the children who had brought them all together. And as Sarah looked at her family, her beautiful, messy, imperfect family, she realized that sometimes the truth is painful, but it's also the only way to heal. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought them to a place of understanding, of love, of hope. And as she held Emma and Noah in her arms, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The story of Sarah, James, Clara, and Marcus is a reminder that life is unpredictable, that love can be messy, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth facing. It's a story about family, about forgiveness, and about the power of love to overcome even the deepest wounds. And as the credits roll on this chapter of their lives, one thing is clear: this is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new journey, one filled with hope, with love, and with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. So, as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, what would you do if faced with a truth so shocking it turned your world upside down? How far would you go to protect the ones you love? And what would it take to forgive, to heal, to move forward? Because in the end, it's not the secrets we keep that define us, it's the courage to face them, and the love that helps us through.